Guys, Pax at Bonum. So today we will be doing a new topic. We are going to talk about JavaScript events. Our learning competencies today is to differentiate the form input tags. We have the text box, checkbox, radio button, submit button, and a simple button. We will also identify what a JavaScript event is, and we will utilize these events to execute our codes in JavaScript. So I want to ask, have you ever wondered how Schoology quizzes work? Diba in Schoology, we have different types of assessments like we have multiple choice wherein you will just click a radio button and then the computer will know if it is correct or not. Let me show you another example of that type of assessment using the website that I have shown you before. Wait a minute. Where is it? Somewhere here. There we go. So it looks something like this. If we press 1 and we check, it will be able to determine if the answer is incorrect or if the answer is correct. Mind you guys, I'm using JavaScript events here, wherein the next item is not displaying not until the current question is answered correctly. So if we select one, it will be able to determine if it is correct or not. So basically, that's how Schoology quizzes work as well. It uses certain codes to know if what you have selected is right or wrong. But of course, before we go deeper into those type of codes, we have to learn first how to create objects that will be able to handle the user's input. Like what you have seen earlier, radio boxes and buttons. So the first part of our lecture here is about HTML forms and how to insert them. So we will cover text box, radio buttons, checkboxes, buttons, and submit button. Although this submit button, we will not actually cover this, but I need to introduce this to you. We will use this in your grade 10 class. So I want to ask you first, guys, if we have these different text areas, what can you generalize regarding the type of information that we can collect? So pause this video for a moment. Think deep. If there is a text box, what type of info is being collected? Well, the simple answer to that is text boxes usually collects open-ended information, meaning you can type anything that you want, any alphanumeric character, as long as there is, or you can type on the keyboard, information will be saved inside your web page. On the other hand, if you have radio buttons like this, the type of information that can be collected is close-ended, meaning the answers are provided for you. You just have to point and click to select an information. The very much is the same for checkboxes. So answers are provided. Users need only select which applies. So how do we insert this type of forms? We need to use the tag form followed by its closing tag slash form. Inside our form, that's where we place in the input tags themselves. The checkbox, the buttons, the radio buttons. So you may think of it as something like a drawing pad. Okay? Wait. My mouse is not working. Where is it? Give me a minute. Okay, there we go. Now, take note that the input tag doesn't have a partner tag. Therefore, this one is it's an empty tag. And aside from that, the input tag must have an attribute type to specify which kind of input it is, whether it's a button, whether it's a checkbox or a text box. So again, going back, like I've said before, think of it as a pad of paper. When we write the form, we are actually creating an invisible rectangle like a paper. And my mouse is not working again. All right, I'm sorry about that. So going back, think of the form as writing an invisible rectangle. So this is the start of your form. This is your slash form. Every time you put an input tag, you write it inside the paper, inside the form. So one input tag, another input tag, you may add as many input tags as you need. So let's look at different examples on how to insert input tags. So the first one is a text box. So how do we add a text box? It looks like this. So let me just demonstrate it to you so that it will be easier. So inside the body, we will write our form, followed by slash form, and then inside, we write our input tag. But then again, as I have mentioned earlier, every input tag needs to have the attribute type. The attribute type signifies which kind of input element is it. So in this case, we are creating a text box. The input type for that is text. So if I save this and display it, wait, give me a minute. So there we go. We have a text box generated. We can use another attribute. So let's say, for example, on page load, you want a text already inside the text box. We add the attribute value. So this value is the actual value of the text box. In cases like usernames and passwords, it's not really a thick and black text. If I'm not mistaken, the attribute type for that is placeholder. So let's try saving this and reload. So there we go. So those are just additional attributes that you can use. So that's how you add a text box. To add a button, we use the type button. Okay, let me just save and show you the output. So the button is already here. Now, when you browse, normally when you see a button, it has a label inside, right? So this is where the attribute value that I've mentioned earlier, this is where it's very useful. We can write here pindotize. So we save, and using the attribute value, we can control the label of an input element. As for a submit button, let me just remove this first. The submit button is submit. If you insert a submit button, it looks very much like a normal button. Let me show you. This is submit. This is button. Very much the same. But there is a big difference between the two. By the way, in a submit button, you can also control the label using value. So I changed the submit text into AAA. So again, what is the difference between a normal button and a submit button? A normal button is where we can program our actions. So whatever we place inside an event, which later we will do, the button will perform it. And that is its purpose, to trigger the events, to trigger the JavaScript events that we code. For example, we can use the button to change a CSS of a particular tag. On the other hand, a submit button, the purpose of it is very, very different. The submit button is used to collect different information that you placed inside the form, and then submit that one. You submit the whole form into a server. And then on the side of the server, that's where computations are created and done. Whatever the output of those calculations, it will just be returned back to the web page. So in a well, it's a bit heavier compared to what we actually need to do in this introduction stage. So we will not really cover the submit button right now. We will cover that in your grade 10 ICT class in web development. So just remember that a button is used to generate actions, while a submit button is used to submit the whole form. So let's proceed with a radio button. I'm sorry if I'm very, very fast, because we need to cover lots of things today so that we have time for your activity. For a radio button, we do it something like this. The input will be, wait, let me just remove first this one. Okay. The input type would be radio. So let me just save one and show you. So there we go. We have a radio button. And normally, if we use a radio button, since it's it's close-ended, there will be several radio buttons, like in a multiple choice, correct? So we have 3 radio buttons. And there's no label for that. And maybe now you might say, sir, let's use value because it can control the text of the element. Okay, let's write value. Let's say here, this is 1. Let me add another one. The second will be 2, and the third one will be 3. Let me save and let me show you the output. Now, the output is still blank. So earlier in the text box and the button, we changed the value and the label also changed. In this case, it did not change. Why? The simple answer to that is we do not normally use the value. We actually do not use the value attribute to change the label of radio buttons. So what I do normally is if I want to add a label, I just put the label before the actual radio button. For example, case A. And then I will add case B. And then case C. So I already have 3 options. Or if you want, you can write it at, or you can put it after the radio button, whichever the case. So you might ask again, sir, what is the purpose of this value? The purpose of the value is if let me just place them side by side. If you select the first one, this means that you are using the value 1. If you select the second one, it means you are using the value 2. And then if you click the third one, you are using value, which is 3. This will come into light once we discuss further the if-else statement that I have introduced to you during the prompt box session. Remember, in the prompt box, we use an if-else statement. So these values will come in handy to determine what the user is selecting. So just imagine this is a multiple choice scenario. The user selected the first one. So we will just create a code checking if the correct answer is 1, or if the correct answer is 2, or if the correct answer is 3. So this will all be understood easily once we go into the if-else conditional statement next week. So for now, just remember that every radio button must have different values. Now we also need to add something. If you can notice, you can actually select different types of radio buttons, which should not be the case. In reality, these 3 radio buttons are actually 3 different types of groups. To make them into one group, we need to add another attribute, which is the name attribute. So in the example, I used same, meaning when we add a name attribute, the name attribute must be the same for all radio buttons. What does it mean? If they have the same names, it means that they are part of one group. Since since they have the same name, now we can select only one from the group of radio buttons. For the checkbox, we will just replace this with checkbox. The checkbox works the same as the radio button. The only difference is the checkbox can select multiple options and it can be turned on or turned off. All right? So, moving further. Let's go to JavaScript Events. Since we already know how the user can interact with the web page, we now proceed with programming the actual interaction. What will happen if the user presses this button? What will happen if the user presses this kind of paragraph tag? Something like that. So we need to go to JavaScript Events. An event is anything JavaScript can react to. So example, what can happen if the page loads? What will happen if you press the mouse button? What will happen if you press a button on the keyboard? What will happen if you resize the window? So we can program JavaScript to react to those types of actions. And one of the simplest ways to understand these events is by using our button. So let's talk about how a button works. In our button, we will add the attribute onClick. So this is called the onClick event. Meaning, if you click on the button, something should happen. So let me remove this and add a button. Okay, so we have one button. Even though we click it so many times, nothing will happen because we don't have any codes yet for the event. So we will add the attribute onClick. And then I want you to try adding first an alert pop-up box. Okay. So let me just save and show you the output. So if we press the button, what happens is the onClick event will be triggered. It will perform what is inside onClick. The code inside onClick is alert. So therefore, if we press the button, onClick will be called, an alert will be displayed. Like this. All right. Now, I just need to tell this to you. Look at how this was written. Let me just copy. Let's use Notepad. Okay, look at how it's written. We have quotation marks placed here, right? But we know that when we use alert, normally when we use alert, we use quotation marks as well, right? But look at how I wrote it. Instead of using double quotes, I use single quotes. When we use Java, you have to be careful with quotations. So like for example, our onClick uses quotations, right? So if there is already double quotes, whatever we will place inside that uses quotes, we should use a different type of quote. Meaning, we already have double quotes outside, therefore inside it should be single quotes. Like what happened here. We have double quotes. For the on-click, for the alert, it should only be single quotes. Now, what is the reason? JavaScript checks the partners or the partner symbols for the codes. So if you have if JavaScript detects double quotes here, it knows that there should be a partner quotation at the end. Just like here, if it has a single quote, Java is expecting that there should be a single quote at the end of alert. What will happen if we still use double quotes here? Pause this video. Think about what will happen. Put yourselves on the shoes of the computer. If you see a quotation and you are expecting a partner quotation, double quotation for that, do you think JavaScript will be able to determine the correct partnering of symbols? And the answer to that is no. Java will have a hard time looking at the different quotations. If there is a quotation here, it's actually checking the characters, or it's actually checking character per character. So if after reading one double quotation and then it finds another double quotation, it will think that this is the first set of code. And then it will also think that the other one is another set. So therefore, since Java will not be able to understand what this is, it will produce, not really produce, but it will commit an error. Nothing will be displayed on the page. And even this one on the middle, Java will not understand that one. Sorry, JavaScript. JavaScript will not understand the words hello because they don't have proper markings. So just follow the general rule. If you already used quotations inside, let's use document.write. Document.write. Instead of using double quotes here, you just use single quotes. Okay, going back. Okay, to change an input element's value, let me change this one. Oh, let me add a text box. And then we have the value. Let me remove first this on click. Okay, we have our text box. And let me change the value to 1, just like in the example. So what I want to happen is whenever we press the button 1, a value 1 will appear on the text box. So how should we do that? Since our form does nothing yet, because you might already realize that we need the on-click event for a button so that it will be able to do something. So we don't have any on-click event, nothing will happen yet. We need to add some bit of JavaScript codes so that it will be able to change the text box. And to change the text box, we need to start from the beginning. We need to determine, no, sorry, not we, but rather the computer must be able to determine who is the recipient of the change of values. Like in the example, we need to change the text box. Therefore, we need to add an ID to the text box so that the computer will be able to pinpoint who will be changing values. So in this example, I added the value, the attribute ID, which has a value of display, the ID of the input, the text box is display. Remember that motivation we did for CSS, so that CSS will be able to check or to select particular instances of a tag. We add an ID. So the same is true here. For us to be able to change the value of the text box, we need to add an ID to the text box so that we can target the text box. So I will be adding an ID for the text box, and I will name the ID display. And then I will add an on-click event for my button so that whenever I click the button, the display will change. Now, what will be the code to change any ID? We will use this code, document.get element by ID, and then we will provide the ID followed by dot value. I know it's very, very long, but you have no choice but to memorize the code plus, which is uppercase and lowercase. Since JavaScript is very, very case sensitive, you need to be very careful which is upper and lowercase. So how will we do it? On the on-click event, we will add here document dot get element by ID followed by dot value. So inside the parentheses will be the ID of the recipient of the change. The ID is display. And then this code, it actually pertains to the text box's value. We can now add an assignment operation, and we can add this one. Let me just save and show you. So if we press 1, the text box will change into 1. It might be very confusing at first, but what you need to realize here is we just implemented the left gets right concept. This is your left side. Document.get element by ID. Display the text box. Your text box is named display, right? So whatever is written inside the text box, it is actually the display. So its value will be changed. It will be changed into 1. So again, left gets right concept. Again, just take note that the ID here must be the ID of the recipient of the change, which is the text box. And we name that text box display. Now let's try manipulating this code. What happens here is if we press 1, the text box's value changes into 1. Even though you press it with so many times, it will still be 1 because it's just changing the text box's value to 1. Instead of using the assignment operation, let's use the plus equal operator. And let's check what will be the output if we use plus equals. If we use plus equals, if we press and press and press, they will just be combined. So it works something like the plus plus operator. I can't remember if I have discussed with you the plus plus operator, but it works somehow the same. Okay, so let's proceed. What if we want to change, instead of a text box, we want to change an HTML element like a paragraph? So don't forget the what do you call this? The process on how to do it. If we want to change programmatically any content, we need to add an ID so that we can pinpoint which will be changing. So this paragraph tag, I will name it par1. So let me just double check if it shows. Okay, it shows. So I will change the paragraph into whatever I want, but instead of using, of course, the ID must be changed. What is the ID of the paragraph? The ID is par1. So I will change this into par1. And let me use again a normal assignment. Okay, instead of dot value, we need to use dot inner HTML. Using dot inner HTML, we can now change the paragraph. As you can see, we already used two different types of codes. Wait, let me just write it again. We use document.get element by ID dot value, and we use document.get element by ID inner HTML. What is the difference between the two? We use dot value if we change any input value. So for text boxes and buttons, you will be changing its label. For radio button and for checkboxes, you will just change its internal value. But if you will be using dot inner HTML, you need to use that to change any HTML element. except for the form and the input. Like example, paragraph, body, what else? Table. So any of that, if they are HTML elements, you need to use .inner HTML. If they are form elements, text box, radio box, checkbox, buttons, you use .value. And of course, do not forget to add an ID to determine who will be changing. So for your activity, I want you to create a numpad. Maybe for now, what you can do is you create this interface, add a text box, and then you add buttons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. And then you have one button for clear. And then if you still have the time, you do the level up task, use a table to format them so that they will look better, so that later on we can add CSS and everything will be aligned. So again, another task is when the user clicks a number button, the number must appear on the text box. And additionally, when a series of numbers are clicked, all numbers will be appearing in sequence. And then when you press a clear button, the text box must be cleared. Meaning, no anything, no value on the text box. We will do this up until day number 3. So I'm expecting that you will be able to do it, since I've already taught you how to change the elements of a tag, or sorry, different kinds of values of input elements or HTML elements. For any questions, you may approach me or you may email me in Schoology. So that's it. Thank you. Goodbye.